The story of this anime is the incarnation of Tamakoi Kanata into the weakest goblin, who is called Gaboro after he suffered an unfortunate death. However, Gaboro was able to retain the memories of his previous life and obtained an extraordinary development. In addition to that, he became strong enough to obtain increases in his abilities through he ate other creatures to gain their sustenance. If you liked the video, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. The story begins on a dark night with a character lying on the ground being stabbed by an unidentified girl, and it is clear that she enjoys killing him. After the boy's death, he opens his eyes and wonders why I am still alive. Who is this dirty green monster? The monster fed him a boiled worm, and the next day, when he woke up, he found himself surrounded by children, and looking at his hands, it turned out that he was a child as well. He came back to life in the body of a green creature. He started crying. On the third day, he found his body growing rapidly, and it became clear that goblins mature very quickly, and he began to produce a sound. The matter did not affect him as he became another being. What was important to him was that he got another chance, and he said this time he will survive. On the fourth day, the old man came offering them food and told them, "This is the last food I will give you, and the rest you will have to get yourself." When he went out for the first time after 4 days, he found himself in a large forest, with scary birds, and completely different plants. About the world he knew, and he got to know the largest goblin among the children, whose name was Gapkichi. Because of hunting, they found a rabbit that they wanted to catch. The plan was for one to chase the prey and the other to hunt it. The idea succeeded, and they hunted the rabbit. His huge friend wanted to eat it alone, but our friend hit him and told him that we should share the food. He was examining the rabbit's horn to see if he could make a weapon out of it. Something strange happened, but he did not know what happened. He and his huge friend began to eat to the point where we believed the huge one. He began to cry and thank Gobro. Eat or cry, choose one. They started hunting again, but this time with a rabbit's horn, which made things easier, and they started hunting again. After that, features appeared on Gobro's face as if he had obtained some ability, as he went back to his memories of when he was in the human world, and the ability he was born with was absorption. In simple words, he can eat anything, something, iron, gold, poison. He takes on the characteristics of anything he eats. And it seems that any ability he had in his old life will be controlled, after he hunted in an amazing way that amazed our huge friend. And GoPro must develop himself because there are many monsters in this world. The world has enormous powers, and on the 6th day, a girl named Gobmi came to them, amazed to hear that they had eaten horned rabbits. This means that it is difficult to obtain such prey, and that someone died after being wounded by a horned rabbit. She was impressed by the strength and blood of GoPro, and the huge Setkna asks her about himself. She answered without looking at him that it was normal. GoPro proposed to her the idea of coming with them fishing tomorrow, and she liked it very much. On the 7th day, the rain was disrupting, so the hunting was postponed until the next day. After that, GoPro went to inspect the food supply, as he wanted to make weapons from them. When he entered, he was shocked by the presence of a human being captive in this place, and the reason was clear to him. This old man named Gobji, who gave him the name GoPro. He is the sheik of this cave, and the sheik says to him, "I think your level will rise quickly. I did this. Can you see it?" He started moving his hands, and a message appeared containing the level he has now, and the old man told him that if you reach level 100, you will be able to evolve into a more advanced living being, and you will be lucky if you are the only one who does this among dozens. It turns out that goblins age quickly, as this old man in his 20s. He thinks that the young men will come here and then you will see how advanced the goblins are, wondering what the next prey they will bring with them. On the 8th day, the trio went hunting, and this time the prey is poisonous snakes. The goblins act as support, our hero fights from medium distances, and our small friend acts as an attacker. This time, there was a lot of hunting because the number of the group this time was high, and they were enjoying the food. GoPro got the message of gaining an ability, which is thermal imaging, so that he can resist poison and search. You scent. Here we discover that whenever he eats a meal, he gains a certain ability with it, and that whenever he eats strong prey, he gains. With many abilities, his huge friend asked him about his ability to eat the head of a snake, and he forbade it because it was poisonous. Then Gobro began to eat it because he had become resistant to poisons, and decided to survive in this world in his second life. On the 9th and 10th days, it was like normal days. Hunting took place on the 11th day. 10. They made a mistake as they went to explore the caves. Without knowing what was in it, the bats came out and ran away from them, and asked our huge friend to defend them. Gobro started fighting them and used his evil eye ability. All the bats stopped and started hunting them. After they ate the bats, Gobro got echolocation ability, so if a Gobro eats prey, it gets the supernatural ability that these animals have, and thus it gets a new set of abilities, and some goblins were watching them while they were dying of hunger. On the 12th day at night, a group of goblins came to eliminate them on the Gobro, but he used his ability and started fighting them, and our huge friend was asleep, dreaming of food. They were all killed. Suddenly, one of them died because the Gobro had not controlled his poison yet. Suddenly, a Gobro appeared and caught one of them. She wanted to kill him, but the Gobro stopped her. On the 13th day, it was hunting day, and this time the prey was a huge, strong pig that was difficult to catch. At first, Gobmi sent a stone at him to knock down a weapon. Gobro dropped it to the ground and killed him. They started eating again and he gained a new ability, which is sexual desire. After finishing eating, they decided to take the rest to their place of living and share it with others, and they began to eat voraciously while he wondered that something had changed in him because his personality was not like that. On a quiet night, Gobro was sleeping. He began to see the level he had become, and he was asked a question if he wanted to develop, and he chose yes without. He taught him what would happen because he just wanted to sleep. On the 14th day, Gobro appeared with hair on his head and a different color on his body. When he saw himself, it turned out that he looked like his old self, but in a different being. Then the sheik came and said to them, "You two have been promoted quickly, and not even a month has passed when you were born, and they also had a big body." Gobekshi was told that he wanted to test how strong he is. He wanted to fight Gobro. A fight began between them, and Gobekshi had a strong physical physique. The fight ended with Gobro winning because he was very fast, and Gobro told him that he was superior to him in the side physical. The sound of wolves was heard coming to them, and he asked Gobmi to come out of hiding and ask her to ban the crossbows they had made. They showed wolves hunting rabbits. They saw a huge pig and they also hunted it, and the trio decided to hide their strength in front of these wolves. The first Gobmi was then hunted. The duo entered to hunt the rest. It turned out that the arrow that Gobmi had thrown had Gobro poison in it. Hunting wolves was easy because the wolves did not have group cooperation and also had no leader. They were all hunted except for the one who was hit by the arrow in the first. He remained alive, but he died suddenly. What? The important thing was that he was their leader. Gobro started eating and gained the ability to hunt, armor, and leadership. They were asked to catch such a quantity and they wondered how. They asked him to teach them how to hunt, and he accepted the order and also taught them how to make weapons. They began to thank him and chant his name. He liked it and decided to continue in this world. He ate a lot to obtain many.
The 17th day, Gobro wakes up Goji to tell him something terrible, since all the human women he had couldn't take it anymore and chose to end it. So they committed suicide. Gobro thinks this is not surprising given the horrible situation the humans were living in, so he and Gobj bid them farewell in silence. On the 26th day, the protagonist continues training the goblins of his generation, and when he's not training him, he spends his time devouring outstanding enemies whenever he can to learn various skills. He notices something approaching, and it turns out to be a group of goblins. The protagonist is about to attack them, but the old man tells him that they are the goblins who go out to work, so he tells him that they are his parents. This leaves the protagonist surprised upon realizing the arrival of his parents. It turns out they brought many waifus. The old man, upon seeing them, says they seem to be in good health and that they are very welcome because they lost the ones they had. They even brought twins. It turns out that goblin genes are dominant. Goblins are born even when procreating with other species. The protagonist thinks he understands the reproductive instinct, but doesn't mean he likes it, so he asks if they can leave the humans in his care. This big one was like, "What do you say? You're a newborn kid." So the atmosphere was getting tense. Then these two arrive and ask everyone to calm down and not involve them in internal disputes. The protagonist wonders who they are, and the old man tells him they are Jobs and the mage Jobs. They suggest that the leaders of both generations fight, and whoever wins will make the decisions for the village, but they tell them they have to fight without weapons, hand to hand. The big one agrees, saying he'll give that kid a lesson. After a battle, the big one ends up all tied up in threads. The old man asks Gobro where he hid that power. He says it doesn't count as a weapon since it's part of his body, like saliva, very tough, really. These two are surprised by Gobro and think they didn't expect a child to be raised like this while they weren't around. So it's a total surprise. Gobro asks if they won't complain now. After that, Gobro went to the humans and told them that he told the others not to touch them. He also tells them that he doesn't intend to harm them, but not only that, because he also tells them that he will give them clothes, food, and everything to keep them safe. He also promises them that one day he will let them return to the humans. The redhead asks what they have to do for him in return. The protagonist thinks he helped them because it suited him, and he tells the redhead that it's nothing out of this world and asks her to teach him what humans know. It turns out they were traveling saleswomen, and the goblin parents attacked them while they were traveling. Now you can't even go selling through life because they attack you. They wiped out all the men, and only they survived. So after telling this sad story, they all start crying. So the protagonist leaves them to cry in peace. On the 28th day, Gobro brings food to the girls, and they say good morning a little happier, but it's not that they recovered soon, but instinctively knew they would suffer less by being positive. While the humans eat, Gobro thinks they don't evolve but have professions, and this waifu is a tester, and Herrera with glasses is an alchemist. The twins are disaster cooks, and the redhead was a novice warrior, but that's not useful right now. So the protagonist plans to include them in training later. Continuing the story, the protagonist trains the older goblins, but some have trouble. After correcting them, he shows who's boss and continues teaching them. On the 31st day, during a friendly match, Gobro faces a goblin named Hot Sun and defeats him realistically. That night, a group of goblins tries to attack the sleeping girls, but Gobro stops them and severely punishes the instigator. It was raining, and Gob, Kichi, and Gobro had a quite realistic friendly combat. That night, something happened as a goblin led others towards the girls, wanting to harm them. One of the goblins said the girls were asleep, but Gobro told them they should be too. He then started attacking them one by one. This woke up the girls, and they got scared. Gobro repeated that he had told them not to touch the girls. The goblin said he didn't understand how well the humans knew, but the protagonist corrected him. He apologized to the girls, and the redhead burst into tears, hugging Gobro. At that moment, Gokichi arrived with Gmi, whom I hadn't mentioned, but who had also evolved. The protagonist asked Gokichi to take him away and asked me to wake up and gather the others, as he wanted them to see what he was about to do. He gathered everyone outside in the rain, with the goblin who had the idea of attacking the girls tied up. He mercilessly beat him and then asked the other goblins if they understood the village rules. They all nodded or gestured yes. The protagonist left them basically on the brink of death, and Hot Sun, the one with the idea, received the worst punishment and died by morning on the 32nd day. The protagonist went hunting with Gokichi and Gmi, and they defeated a formidable tricornio horse. After eating and acquiring numerous skills, especially the triple thrust, they returned. One night while the protagonist slept, the redhead approached him and lay down beside him. The protagonist thought she must have been very scared last night, so he ended up spending the whole night with her. On the 33rd day, when he woke up, Gmi was sleeping on the other side of the protagonist. That day, they also found out that Gobu, who had accompanied Gobro as a pack mule, had evolved into a hot goblin like the protagonist and the others. Meanwhile, training was going well. Gotkichi led the heavy team unit, Gmi led the long-range attack, Gobu supported and ran errands, Hobbs handled the light team focused on mobility, and Hobbs was the only mage in the village. The protagonist thought he'd like her to lead the magical unit, but for now, she was alone. That day, Gobro left the training in the hands of the leaders and ventured into the forest alone to hunt several prey. Realizing how strong he had become, He ventured into the north area of the forest and remembered something upon seeing bloodstains on the ground. As the old man had warned them never to step there, in the northern forest, they were warned about a huge, terrifying red bear living deep within it. The protagonist realizes he's in the deepest part of the forest when a massive red bear appears. Gobro obviously won't flee as he wants to defeat and devour it. Meanwhile, Godney was worried that Gobro hadn't returned yet, and the other goblin went to inquire but got no good response. Meanwhile, the protagonist was fighting the bear, which sacrificed its own arm to block a spell the protagonist cast. The bear proved to be a formidable opponent, more resilient than expected. Gobro decided to go all out, landing a powerful blow to the bear's mouth, seemingly defeating it easily. However, the bear retaliated, sending the protagonist flying into a tree, injuring both him and the bear. With the sword still in its mouth, Gobro thought the bear wouldn't be able to spit fire anymore. But to his surprise, the bear and Gobro faced off again. By the end of the battle on day 34, Gobro managed to defeat the bear, though he was in bad shape and eventually passed out. He received a notification of level advancement, evolving into an ogre. When he returned to the village, everyone thought a Hogro was attacking them, but Godney recognized Gobro and was relieved. She asked about his left hand, and Gotkichi marveled at the prowess of the purple-haired waifu. The villagers were impressed that Gobro defeated the king of the northern forest with just a month of life.
The good old Gam is the only one to realize that he's actually Gopro and kicks him because she was very worried, but since he's now very powerful and tough, it's GM who feels the pain of the kick as she writhes on the ground. And now everyone realizes that Gopro is actually amazing. After all, the red bear used to devour even ogres, and our protagonist defeated it with just 1 month of life, so he spent the whole day answering everyone else's questions. But he's happier to have returned alive. After a while, everyone except the red and Gotham leaves him alone. They followed him around like a mother hen with her chicks, but since he wanted new clothes, he quickly headed to where the humans were, and obviously they got scared when they saw him. The truth is, he almost cried inside because he had known them for a while, and after showing them that he was clearly the same Gopro as always, they understood. However, GM kept pinching him from below. But since he's very tough, he didn't feel anything, so he let her do what she was doing. He also returned the axe, which the blacksmith had made all bent, and since he saw that he had used it a lot, she told him that she had also made a knife with a spiritual stone. He found that very interesting and was so grateful to her that he even patted her head as if she were a little puppy, and since he had been taking care of them, the blacksmith smiled like a little girl, while our Gopro loved the girls' faces when they seemed to be tickled. But the two jealous ones pinched him even harder, and then the two blonde sisters asked him for help, so he thought it would be best to send them 3 female goblins. When they saw them grateful and happy, they surprised him because they also integrated themselves among their enemies, and that speaks well of their adaptability and mental strength. So, putting his hand on both of them, he told them that they would be very good wives in the future and, in a flirtatious manner, asked if they weren't interested in him. Those words obviously left them very embarrassed, although they also knew that he was just flattering them, and well, he was very happy to see their very pleased smiles, and at the same time, they were very adorable. But while he was enjoying everything, the other two joined him to hit him because they are extremely toxic. After that, he headed to where the alchemist was, who was obviously making potions, but more importantly, he asked her about the poison she had. So, she tells him that she wanted to use it for self-defense, but now she knows that she can trust some goblins like him, and obviously, she no longer plans to poison anyone's food, so he quickly carries her, and she mentions that he has become so imposing that she doesn't know what to do. As he carries her, she smiles, and he is amazed by her shy smile, so serene and beautiful, but then, he feels chills from the toxic ones, so he spent some time with them. The next day, on day 36, he had to cancel his afternoon fights in which he participated because he almost broke his friend Gok's armor, and he left the ordinary goblins almost dead, obviously. he moved on to healing them. However, Gobkichi mentioned that she was going hunting, and obviously, our Gopro noticed that something was wrong with his friend. Later, he saw the red-haired one training on her own. They also informed him that Gobu was still extracting spirit stones, and Gob and Hobbs had gone hunting together. As for him, he was weaving a large blanket to sleep in, so our protagonist took the opportunity to ask about his friend Gokichi, mostly about whether he was okay, but she only replied that it would depend on where his efforts took him. He understood that and took the opportunity to ask her to return his book, but she ignored him and tried to learn the spells as quickly as she could. Meanwhile, the old man happily watched them having fun. That particular day was a very relaxing day for our protagonist. The next day, after his usual morning training, he was calmly eating his breakfast when out of nowhere, Gobu came running, shouting for help, as he was carrying a carbuncle covered in blood. Of course, the first thing he did was heal it. Gobu explained that he found the little one while digging, and after a while, the little one woke up, wondering where she was and who they. So, our heroes explained everything that happened to her, and she agreed to talk to them. She revealed that humans attacked her recently because the jewel on her forehead can be sold for 1 billion gold coins. She asked them for a favor to hunt down those human adventurers because she doesn't have much time left. Lidana, this small carbuncle, was created by the legendary magician called Velvet, who designated her as the guardian of his secret warehouse. When the humans attacked her, they severely damaged her core, so she has very little time left. According to what Lidana heard, that secret warehouse contains mountains of legendary objects worth a fortune, and she prefers to give them to our heroes rather than let the disgusting humans keep them. Without much thought, our Gopro called the rest, as they would accept her request. That same day, they would go to the warehouse. He also asked the blacksmith to bring that spiritual stone knife she mentioned, as it would make him look more powerful to the humans, and it could serve as a deterrent against them. However, the red-haired one warned him that she wouldn't go with the intention of killing them, and she would try her best to convince them. If she couldn't, they would have to take action, and they would eat them in return. To reach Velvet's hidden warehouse, they entered through the hole in the wall that Gobu had made, and he was surprised by the tremendous strength she had despite being so small. He also asked the other goblins to hide so that he can speak alone with the humans, and while he was searching for them, he found them. Despite being in front of them, the humans shout that they will kill him and then take the jewel from the dwarf. One of them proceeds to attack him from behind, hiding his presence, but obviously, our Gopro stops him with just one hand and reproaches him for killing the inhabitants of this place and stealing their treasures, which is a clear case of robbery and murder, and the worst part is that the human adventurers don't even feel bad about it. So, even though they are a very rare race, this time he will be very compassionate with them. He tells them that if they leave now, he will spare their lives. However, the humans ignore him and start attacking him with swords, and one even throws a lightning bolt at our Gobro's head, which makes him lose his patience. Using earth magic, he stops them in place and signals for the others to come and kill them. Because these fools didn't understand even with words, with the knife given by the blacksmith, he dismembers them and they all eat them. Obviously, our protagonist, being smarter, tasted a part of each adventurer to acquire their abilities. Once they were eliminated, they kept their belongings, thus finding a hermit's ring, which hides the bearer's information, and also a magic bag that can store up to 99 units of 200 types of objects. But to try something new, our protagonist ate it and acquired the inventory ability. Yes, his ability is too broken. After the feast and banquet, and seeing the adventurer's items, they headed to Belbeck's treasure chamber, where they found a lot of gold and weapons, but also the deceased body of this mage. The small Lidana thanks them, pointing to her master, who was an expert at controlling spirits. In this warehouse, they can find various spirit stones, but when it's in the hand of our Gobro, his body starts to shine and disappear from below, bidding farewell to our protagonist. Now, only the jewel remains, and he swallows it, thus acquiring the Golden Rule ability. While nearby, Gobkichi was very worried about Gobu, but she reassures him that everything is fine. They all prayed silently for Lidana to bid her soul farewell, and they collected all the treasure, realizing that the inventory ability was very useful as everything fit inside. Even though there was still space left, they left the warehouse completely clean and empty, since he didn't want to leave the deceased magician's body just like that. he decided to cremate it. When he did, an object fell out, which was a metallic arm. Gobro quickly grabbed it, and it adhered to his body in a very painful way. This made our protagonist wonder if they gave it to him because the magician no longer needed it. This arm turns out to be a lost legacy of the gods, which has armor breaking, magic breaking, self-evolution, and elemental echo abilities. Perhaps in the future, we'll see him using some of these abilities. Obviously, when he showed it to everyone, they were surprised because it not only functions as a normal hand, but can also rotate 360 degrees, and the best part is that he can use it as his own hand, allowing him to launch poison and threads. Now that they've completed Latana's request, they prepare to cover the entrance and celebrate with the alcoholic beverages they found. So, the next day, along with the blacksmith, they began to appraise the weapons, which took the whole day. So, on day 39, he gave magical items to the 10 hobgoblins that are there now, and he kept a very fancy spear, as well as a bracelet and the already known arm, these being 3 legendary artifacts. In the afternoon, they went to look for ingredients to cook a bear stew, which turned out very delicious for the blondes. The fact that the others leveled up was very advantageous when they defeated the bear. As for the red-haired girl, she doesn't fight very well, so he thinks something should be done about it. But on day 40, he decided to choose the leader of the hobgoblins, who obviously would be below him in hierarchy, and he did this through a tournament. The next day, in the morning, he went out for a walk in search of undiscovered prey, finding a red deer with horns that looked like pink quartz, which he obviously ate. He also encountered a golden spider, from which he took the exoskeleton since it looked expensive and pretty. Thanks to this monster, he obtained the ability of golden threads. After that, he wandered through the forest, encountering a large tree where he had a mishap. It turns out that in this world, there are dryads who seduce men with their intelligence. Although they are all physically attractive, they deceive men and feed on them. The old man told him he didn't want to die without trying one of them. All of this is relevant because our lucky protagonist is facing one of them. Even though he resisted her flirtations at first, he ended up using his libido ability on her, obviously making her his own. After that, she promised to wait for him to return. But our protagonist only replied that he would return if he felt like it. So after that, our Gobro went to bathe in a lake. But then he was surrounded by lizard men and an ugly bull. Obviously, he ended up with both of them. So, on day 42, he discovered that 2 little goblins could be mages, which obviously pleased the only mage in the village, although her smile gave more chills. So later he studied later enchantment, which served to intervene in the matter, and when he tried to show it to the blacksmith, she was in a bad mood like the others. Even the blondes had poisoned food for him, and as he didn't know who else to ask for advice, he went to the alchemist, who was the calmest of them all, and obviously she gave him the answer, and that is because they're all jealous, and the reason for this is very obvious since our protagonist had hickeys all over his neck. And even the alchemist flirted with him, but she limited herself to giving him a kiss on the cheek, and then the flirting began, and just as they were so close, Gimi appeared to interrupt because she also wants the same thing, and well, then all the others from his harem come. So he very cleverly closed the room with golden threads, and also he used atmosphere manipulation so that those outside couldn't hear those inside. So basically he applied soundproofing in the place, and when Gokage was curiously passing by to see what it was, his companion just told him they were busy and he better not interrupt them. And well, that night for our Gobro was very hot and full of pleasure, but also if something were to happen he would take responsibility, and so it was that on day 44 our Fader tells us that his ability to detect has been improving so much that now he can discover the race and strength with just one glance, and it's thanks to that he now felt something coming. And at the same time, one of his companions called him because those who arrived were none other than elves, and on top of that, the leader of this group is not humble at all as he complains to him for having made him wait so long. So our bro remembers that his instinct told him that these would give them problems, and after having heard that presumptuous elf, our protagonist quickly understood that the humans planned to attack the elves, and what they want is help in exchange for a reward, which was to give them food for several months. And obviously our bro denies that deal, since after all it's their problem, and he emphasizes that if they want to ask for a favor from other races, they should show much more humility. And upon hearing this, The leader of the elves gets heated up and is about to draw his sword, but our golden gorilla just with a glance leaves them perplexed and very exhausted, so much so that they can't even move. And without wasting time, he grabs the leader by the neck and tells him that if he doesn't want his neck crushed, he should order his escorts to lower their bows. But then one of the archers shoots an arrow at our protagonist, but he catches it with his mouth and nothing happens to him. So the scared braggart asks everyone to lower their weapons at the same time that our big bro, taking out his spear, emphasizes that he won't help them just because he doesn't feel like it. But unfortunately, since they also live in the same place, he knows that the humans will soon come to bother them too, so he is willing to help, and when he pounds his spear against the ground, he suppresses all the elves present at once because the ability of his spear is called Tempest, and it works within a radius of 100 m. So at the same time he releases the elven leader, and he and the others take advantage of it to run away like cowards, and seeing them run away like that, our bro thinks they shouldn't come back for a good while, so the next day he set out to hunt some gray slimes, which are usually found at the bottom of the forest, and in total he caught about 20, and by eating their cores he acquired different abilities like physical resistance, fluid replacement, and auto-fission, the latter being the one that caught his attention the most. So by making a wound on his finger, he placed his blood on a rock to which he gave the shape of a small sprite, and yes, that's how autovision works, although he can also see himself through the little doll, and with that an idea occurs to him. So on day 46 he mixed his blood into the lining of some dresses that the girls had to go out and gave them to Kmi and some human girls, as they would serve as a transmitter in case of emergency, and the next day is when we see him using his red doll. And it's good that he used it because the elves came just then, and this time better prepared, but our ogre friend won't allow it, and with just a shout he scares all the elves to the point that they can't even move, so our protagonist quickly goes out and captures them all with his threads, and once they're all sitting and gathered he asks the leader why they came back, but the inept one just answers that they hurt his pride, and that's why they deserve to die. However, not even his companions defend him as they tell our bro that they tried to stop him, but he doesn't listen to them, so our bro tells them that from now on they should consider their leader dead and all the others will have friendly fights, and he promises them that he won't kill the winners of the fights, and well, the results were that 6 out of the 23 elves who participated lost, and yes, all the losers were males because our protagonist didn't want to kill the pretty girls, and as the cheater he is, he secretly rigged the pairing, so now he asks the winners to hand over their weapons and magic items because from now on they'll be their prisoners, and also, and the jumble, it occurs to them to complain, but he can't stand the chatter and tells them not to ask for so much since after all they came to kill them. At the same time we see that the old man is waiting for the night as he is quite horny, but our big bro reminds the old man not to touch them without permission, and there the old man recognizes that our bro is the leader, and as such he will listen to him, and he recognizes that the young ones need a good example like him, and those words move our big bro. However, the little old man ruins it all because he asks him to let him have one from time to time if he looks a lot like Master Rashid, so after a very dirty conversation he sets out to punish the leader of the elves, and apparently from what was seen he eats him, and on day 48 when Gokichi was killing a bear he finally arrived, reached level 100. So obviously he could evolve. On day 49, we see his new appearance. He looks very muscular, robust, and red. Obviously, when our protagonist sees him, he recognizes him immediately, while giving him some pats to feel his chest. Quite a manly moment. Unlike our protagonist, Gokichi evolved into a variation of an ogre. His tanned skin is due to the blessing of the demigod of fire, and the tough and shiny skin like iron is thanks to the blessing of the demigod of war. Then, our red friend tells Gobro that since he became Nogro, he can't fight with any of them, and at one point, he thought he wouldn't catch up, but now that he did, he asks him to face him again. Obviously, our white-haired friend accepts this fight. So we immediately see them surrounded by different goblins, as they have already started exchanging blows. Even Kokichi manages to land some hits on our protagonist, but in the last fist clash, the red one falls, so our protagonist doesn't think he's still winning against him in hand-to-hand combat. However, he has no doubt that Goichi is now his rival. In the evening, when he was very tired after the friendly match, something approached him, apologizing for something, and asking him to please accept this. In his system, our protagonist sees that he got something, but when he gets up from nowhere, he doesn't know what happened. So we come to day 51, and Gobu is leading him by the hand, and even tells him to be quiet and watch. This little one is really oppressive. And it's there that we see 4 new hobgoblins, which were obviously inspired by our Gobkichi, and the alchemist mentions that one of them could be a magician, and as for the other, he is more suitable to be a cleric. So the young one introduces himself as Gopi, and addressing our Gapuro, he says, "Brother, I will strive to heal as many wounded as I can," although obviously, the word brothers seems a bit strange to our protagonist, so the young man explains that they are all like brothers from birth. And that's when he notices the supreme mage of the village, that is, Jobs, so our protagonist asks her to explain her new appearance, so she tells him that she became a semi-lord sorcerer, although there she shows him that she has some marks, something he can't stand, because he also has them on his body. And then Gosei, seeing him distracted, tells him that now that he has magical power to spare, they should go check if they are really strong, and so they do. And this crazy one quickly sets the forest on fire, and very humbly mentions that she still has plenty of energy to cast that spell 20 times, so our protagonist tells her that there's no need for that since with this, he could see how powerful she is. At the same time, in his mind, he explains that races with the name Semi are less powerful than the original races, and in her case, it's very likely that her next evolution will be to a Lord Sorcerer, and after a while, he gives her a new set of equipment to celebrate her evolution, and well, their Sato is envious to see her with a new outfit, but Gops calmly mentions that he will soon catch up, and with that, our protagonist realizes that in this village, precisely, the goblins, they evolve a lot and very quickly, and he's quite sure it's because of his influence, seeing them grow and develop. The new goblins, he theorizes that their development varies according to their environment during the first month. Although he believes it's all good because now he has very strong companions, he also knows that there are others who haven't grown in the same environment. On day 52, when he had gone out with his friend, he encounters the older goblins from the previous generation. They recognize that they can't keep up anymore, and even though they try to surpass them, the young ones always outpace them. Currently, they don't even accept a duel anymore. Because of all this, they decided to leave the village. They even tell our protagonist that if they want to kill them, go ahead, as they don't want to continue living in such a miserable way. But our protagonist doesn't have any problem with that, and furthermore, he's not going to kill them because they are not stealing anything from the village, and all the equipment they carry is theirs. He even gives them a knife made of a magical metal called mitral, with which they can cut through anything. So we're already on day 53, and during his walk in the forest, he found an orc that had annihilated a human. Although he was already dead, he planned to leave him there. But when he noticed that he possessed a peculiar ability, he decided to keep him, so he ended up killing the little orc. And this ability is Monster Tamer. Furthermore, in the evening, the alchemist surprised him with something, as she believed she created what he desired so much. Upon taking it, he becomes very happy and joyful, and the next day he gathers everyone and tells them that the generation of their parents has left the village. In front of everyone, he mentions that if anyone wants to leave, they should simply raise their hand, and not to worry, as he won't stop them. Just like those who left, he will give them a farewell gift, but obviously, no one leaves, and he mentions that it's better that way. Raising his glass, he says it's time to toast, and several peaceful days pass, during which he dedicates himself to creating earrings for the ears with his blood, and he calls them IRC. Thanks to this, he could converse with them, and once they were tested, he mass-produced them. By day 57, he noticed that Gobu had developed very well, and she had even been able to kill a tricornio, and the best part was that she captured it almost unharmed. So with this great opportunity, he used the Monster Tamer ability of that human, and that powerful monster became his first familiar. But not content with that, they also took the burly bear, and thanks to this, they captured the leader of the wolves, whom they left as a bodyguard for the humans. On day 59, something interesting happened for him, as the redhead, who didn't stand out much in combat, shone that day, leading him to think that at least she is someone who extracts all her potential when cornered. Moreover, she was able to take on 3 cops herself, just as she was inviting him. Her chicken alerted her that she had learned a new profession, with which she can now capture prey she couldn't before. However, if she doesn't regularly eat monsters, she will die. Still, he finds the progress of her skills amazing. After that, the goblin cleric informs him that some goblins injured by humans have returned today. Thus, our protagonist tells the boy that the war between humans and elves will start very soon. On day 60, in the morning, thanks to his detection ability, he notices many cops fleeing. However, he fails to detect who is pursuing them because it's too dark for his ability. He prepares with the others and tells them to ignore the cops. They manage to notice magical skeletons, although not those goblins. They try to attack with arrows, which doesn't work. Our protagonist analyzes the situation and notices a larger signal behind all the skeletons, being sure it's the one creating them. Meanwhile, Sato was fighting one of them, and when another appeared behind her, she eliminated it quickly. With this information, our protagonist tells everyone to drop their weapons, and they start beating the skeletons. The redhead was eating one of them. When everyone is tired, our protagonist finishes them all off in less than 10 seconds, including the summoner, whom he devours, learning the ability to summon lesser undead. After that, the cobs, who hadn't been harmed, thank our protagonist, calling him Sir. They explained that they were working peacefully and stumbled upon Velvet's treasure chamber, awakening the superior skeleton guarding the place. To escape the tremendous horde of skeletons, they risked coming to the cave of the terrifying Dark Lord. By a small mistake, they almost died. They thank our protagonist for being alive thanks to him. Being a good person, our protagonist decides to heal the wounded, and they will talk later. He realizes that the group is becoming more diverse and larger.
So the next day they go hunting with Gokichi when suddenly they come across 2 heavily armed humans up to their underwear, and obviously, they followed him until the wretches hid in front of a small path. So Pepe Gapro decided to listen to them with his magical threads. That's when he found out that the humans were planning to kidnap the daughter of the elf chief and were going to attack her just as she was leaving the festival. Obviously, it's not that these humans are seers, but rather that one of the elves betrayed their own race and leaked the information to the humans. So 2 hours later, the victims were passing through that place, and obviously both our Gapro and Gokichi stayed to guard, noticing with great surprise that the said Suso was the most beautiful, and just then, they attacked and shot arrows at some elves, while also putting their target to sleep. Obviously, Papi Gapro intervened, solving the situation for the elves in the blink of an eye, and yes, the humans were trapped in this huge web that Gokichi was carrying. As for the dead elves, our protagonist had no choice but to pray for their souls. So, the next morning, somehow they managed to get information from the captured humans, learning that the human army will attack in about 20 days. Obviously after that, our Gapro devoured the 12 humans, but the good thing is that he also acquired their skills. Then, when he lifted the elf, he realized she had wings, and she seemed apprehensive, thinking he would abuse her little body. But obviously, Papi Gapro is not abusive, so he waited for the right moment to explain everything. Far from thanking him, she hit him, also reproaching him for not saving her other companions. So, as an ungrateful person, our protagonist pushed her away with just one finger, clarifying that the problems between elves and humans are not his problem. He also revealed that there is a traitor in her race, so, instead of crying, he recommended that she do something about it. However, the elf didn't listen and just cried. Meanwhile, the old man wanted to have his way with the pretty elf, but Papi Gapro warned him not to touch her, and that's how we reached day 63. As our protagonist tells us that he left the base to accompany the elf. During the journey, he took the opportunity to ask her about those wings. Since the other elves didn't have them, she explained that only the high elves have them, which are the evolution of the elves. In his eyes, our Gapro thinks they surely can fly. Then she mentioned that normally they can hide their wings and don't show them to the public. However, sometimes they accidentally reveal them because she hasn't fully mastered control over them yet. After that brief conversation, they spent 3 hours walking until they reached the elf village. However, upon arriving they were waiting for them 25 elves with bows, and on top of that, the arrows they had were mithril. Although our Cobra mentioned that the sorghum can withstand a few dozen of those arrows, the elf tells everyone to stop, affirming that these two people saved her. After a small discussion, they were allowed to enter, and the village chief is very happy that his daughter returned safe and sound. However, our protagonist, colder than ice, points out that he didn't save his daughter out of the kindness of his heart. The old man understands that our Gobro wants a reward. However, in the mind of our fornicator, he knows that this little test he is conducting will serve to see if he can make decisions coldly. So, they bring him the Filnatut, which is a family treasure and a magical object known as the Bow of Absolute Precision, a lost legacy of the gods. But his daughter doesn't seem to like the idea because it's very valuable to the family. However, the village chief calmly mentions that he cannot give them less since they brought her back safe and sound. Seeing all this, our protagonist mentions that he was only testing him, so as a gift, he will provide him with information about the movements of the human army, which the old man is interested in. Immediately, they form an alliance, shaking hands. And that's how our Gobro tells us that later the elf fathers sent them a large amount of mithril equipment, and in return, they sent them knives and shovels with spiritual stones. Although in one of the conversations, the old man asks about their elite forces since they have been missing for about 20 days, and he just wants to know if he knows anything about them. Obviously, our Gobro told him that he had no idea, although we all know what really happened, and even in the farewell, they gave them gifts, which were medicine and liquor created in this elven village, and obviously, upon hearing the word liquor, our Gobro told him to let him know whenever he needs it, being a big fan of cold drinks, and upon arriving home and tasting it, he realizes that it's very refreshing and delicious, which is just another reason to be friends with the elf chief. So, the next day, when he was waking up little Cop, he realized that she evolved into the Denira variation. According to her, she has the blessing of the god of the frozen fields, which allows her to create and control a large amount of ice, and above all, she has a special ability called Enchanting Eye. Our Gobro finds it very useful as it makes enemies fight each other, so they made him special glasses and asked him not to use it unless he's facing the enemy, although he also noticed that his blessing removes the weakness to the sun. However, what surprises him the most is her current appearance, as that image and figure are very similar to that of a woman he met in his previous life, and as our horny friend was staring at her a lot, she thought something else, so he goes crazy and tells her that he was just admiring her. At the same time, we find out that Go also evolved into a half-earth lord. These are very useful as they manipulate the terrain very well since they can read and search for weak points, and now that their body is very strengthened, they also have lightning magic, which helps them find minerals. And another one that evolved is Hobbs, because now he is a semi-bloodthirsty lord, and as his title indicates, he manipulates blood, while he can use it as a weapon. However, the new evolved ones noticed that they also have their tattoos, and although they have different shapes and are in different places, they are similar, so he becomes curious, and the old man, on his part, seeing that they have evolved again, has no better idea than to give them new names, being that now our protagonist is called U. And as for GOP Kichi, it changed to Ogre Kichi. Now, on the part of the females, Gops would become Haruke Eset, now it would be Blotto, and as for CMI, there is a difference because now it would be called Dumei, and the last one would be Jobs, which now would be called Psy, and well, they also classified them according to the strength they have, and changing the subject, he knows that if a war starts between humans and elves, the latter would ask for help, and as now our Cobro has more pawns, he has more strategies available, so he decided to distribute communication pendants. However, many elf women did not want to, emphasizing that decorating their ears is a taboo, so our OW had no choice but to close with them in the room all night to strip them. Quite a guy. Although there we also see the Virgo of Hobum not knowing what to do in the face of such noise, and once with the Elus and the Cobalt with pendants. He added them to the training to then have them fight against skeletons that he generates with his magic to invoke lesser undead. He also explained that the more the armor covers, the better rank the skeleton has. In addition, the weakest ones have white bones, while the rarest and strongest ones have black bones, and when they made them face the latter against the elves, many couldn't even with mitral weapons. However, the losers felt satisfied for some reason, and so he decided to continue gaining their friendship naturally. So that already on day 65, he realized that using more magic allowed him to summon normal skeletons, zombies, and black skeleton mages, and although he is intrigued by the taste of these species, he cannot eat them as they are ghosts. And although several of these have different competencies and serve to train under the sunlight, they purify themselves and disappear in seconds. Therefore, they cannot be used during the day. Also, he tells us that in his village now they exceed 100 inhabitants. And it is there that we meet a crazy girl who likes to eat rotten food because they are her favorites, and she doesn't listen to anyone, not even him, who tells her that it's dangerous to eat that. So the next day they went to the cave where the cobras lived, where they collected their things, and Ertrude took care of closing the place so that no more skeletons would come out, and the kobolds, in a group, were hunting more wolves to increase the number of pets in the village, and that's when they came across a wild boar. Ertrude demolished it with a single blow, so that same night they ate a delicious stew, and during that night, the blacksmith gave him the halberd that had broken while fighting the red bear, but unlike the previous one, this one is made of a combination of spiritual stone, forged iron, and also mitral. Making just that weapon is a very demanding job, as the blacksmith, mastering the treatment of spiritual stone, acquired the profession of elemental blacksmith, and for such a good job, our protagonist gave her a reward. So the next day, being day 67, his friend Ogre Kichi wanted to talk about deep matters of the heart with his friend Gro. It turns out that our red friend is in love with her true, something that our protagonist had already noticed a long time ago, as his friend had always been an open book. So Kokichi grabs his friend and asks him for advice on how to express his feelings because he doesn't know how to do it, and this situation of a friend confiding a secret to him is very comforting to our protagonist. So he asks him to propose to her that night because if she rejects him, it will hurt less. Even though our ogre doesn't have faith in himself, we believe in him, so let's go, Red. So, our protagonist, being the calmest one, mentioned to him the next day to tell him how it went, and at night, under a red moon, our shy ogre Kichi managed to talk to her alone, and although he stuttered, he finally managed to propose to her to be happy with him, and obviously, she tearfully accepted. It turns out that Ertrude had also asked Dai for advice, and between her and our Go-Bro, they encouraged them both to confess their feelings, so when fighting our protagonist, he managed to land some good blows, even mentioning that he felt very light today. Upon hearing this, our protagonist was worried about Ertrude, thinking that maybe Orak Kichi had left her incapacitated, but she was fine, albeit somewhat sweaty, and as for Orak Kichi, he was so strong and energetic that even our protagonist let him fight a black skeleton. After the tough training, they went hunting together, as there were many new insectoids, which served to gather carapaces. During one of these meals, he obtained the ability of an exoskeleton, which he could summon at will. When he tested it against the axe, he noticed it was very resistant and self-regenerated, dispersing impacts. Even Goen found it a very beautiful armor. However, when he removes the armor at will, the clothes he had on also disappear because this ability uses what one is wearing. Additionally, he can register a total of 4 forms. So he decided to add 2 combat forms, aerial and naval. For the aerial form, he used the Hitro and was able to create insect wings. However, lacking much practice, he fell in the first attempt. When he wanted to try the next form, it started raining, so he trained with the red ball instead. After sweating, he went to visit the blacksmith, where he also noticed that some elves came frequently to share opinions about new weapons. These 2 were named Kiru and Aru. They explained that mitral is worked after turning it into an amalgam. To give us an idea, the spiritual stone alloy of our protagonist's halberd is another amalgam. He also noticed that the blacksmith had developed a very fast shooting crossbow, so he asked her to mass produce it, providing her with some amalgams, and she gladly accepted the task. On the other hand, the chef sisters were promoted to head chefs, So he took the opportunity to teach them how to make French fries. Then he conversed with the alchemist about magical item creation. She managed to create bones from the black skeleton, emphasizing their usefulness in immobilizing targets. It was also her first masterwork since learning object creation. Being playful, she suggested our ogre imagine it's her and use it lovingly, which our protagonist found enticing. Unable to resist her playful nature, something happened between them. But they were caught by the others, and another night passed without counting. So the next morning, a small group of unknown elves appeared in the village, not recognizing the others as they were camouflaged by the earrings, making them appear as dark elves. And now, it's time to tell him about the problem because the human army has started marching into the forest. So the elf representative tells him that group has been declared dead to them, and as for the deal, he mentions that they will be paid very well, but if they desert, everything will be nullified. So Froda accepts the assignment, but he emphasizes that they will move as they please. However, he also hands over a communication device to be delivered to the village chief, and then they left. But since our reincarnated friend is very clever and knows that information is very valuable, he distributed copies throughout the forest. He knows that if one desires peace, they must prepare for war. At the same time, he asks CMI to gather everyone else, and he informs them that from today they will be mercenaries, since none of them understand. Ogre Kichi is the only one to ask, so he explains that they are basically a professional combat group, and their group name will be Parvilum, nothing else.